today, my friends, we will be talking about growth. Growth, as you know, is a very important topic in pediatrics. And this is very typical of children. So because children from the point of inception is continuously growing till he or she attains normal adulthood. So what happens in growth that we will look into today, a little idea, basic idea about growth, and then we will talk about growth assessment and growth monitoring. For a pediatrician, it's a very important topic, and from the examination point of view, both undergraduate and postgraduate, there are a lot of questions coming from growth. So we will try to approach it with that in mind as well. Let us see. What do we mean by growth? So growth is basically increase in size of mass, of tissues, of different tissues, increase in size of the whole body as a whole. And what is the importance of this growth? The main importance is growth is affected by numerous conditions, numerous social, environmental, genetic, as well as the general well-being of the individual. So the growth will tell us about the health status of the child. So that is why it is so very important. We will now look at growth, from the point of view of the changes that is happening as the child is evolving. So starting from the phase of embryo, ovum or embryo in utero, right from conception, growth is occurring. In utero, the three phases we know of are the ovum, the embryo, and the fetus. So the first 2 weeks is the ovum, then comes 2 weeks to 8 weeks embryo, and the organ development phase as fetus from 8 weeks till birth. Then the child is born. Then there is the phase of newborn period up to, we know, 28 days. Then comes infancy, which is up to 1 year, followed by toddlers, that is 1 to 3 years, and preschoolers up to 6 years, school-going children, and finally the adolescents or puberty age group. And this covers from inception or from conception to 18 years. Why make these differences? It's not just that the size of the individual is growing. It's not that an ovum is bloating up like a football and an adult is a huge size ovum. Is it that? So it is not. There are changes not only in size, but in proportion in the inner organs. All of this together is taken into account as growth. So what are the different dimensions? The most important dimensions that we look into, one is general growth. That is increase in size, which is evident by looking at the weight and height. Then comes growth of the brain. Then growth of the lymphoid tissue. These are all important parameters we need to know when their growth is occurring to understand various diseases and body conditions. Finally, we come to the sexual growth or the reproductive growth. Now, all of these growths, just think about it, do not occur at the same time at the same rate. Let us take a look at a chart. This is known as the Scammonn's curves. This tells us nicely when which growth is predominating. Like the general growth rate or velocity increases, is high in the first few years. Then the growth velocity slows down, but it's still growing. Till again at the pubertal age, there is a spike. So this is how the curve goes. You can see this is the general growth curve, this one. Okay? Sorry, the middle one. Whereas the brain growth in the first 3 or 4 years, it increases in size at a tremendous rate and then plateaus down. Later on, it's almost similar. Whereas the reproductive growth, in the earlier ages, it is very slow. And during pubertal age, there is a sudden spike. Lymphoid again spikes around 8 to 10 years. So these are different curves. Having an idea about this growth pattern, we need to look into the different factors that affect growth. So what is growth dependent on? As I was just telling you, to start with, genetic factors are important. The genetic constitution will vary according to the inheritance of the child. So there will be familial factors, there will be ethnic factors regulating the growth pattern of a child. Moreover, there are certain diseases which affect growth and different aspects of growth which are also genetically determined. Next, very most important cause affecting growth is nutrition. Actually, growth depends on what nutrition the child is getting. Then comes the metabolic and endocrine factors. Various hormones come into play to affect growth. Hormones like growth hormone, thyroid hormone, sex hormones, the growth factors, they're all important. And they play their major roles at various ages. In the first year of life, it is the thyroid hormone that is most important. The growth hormone starts affecting growth more from the end of the first year onwards, whereas the sex hormones are most predominantly effective in the later part of childhood. So it's a composite effect leading to general growth. Finally, we come to illnesses. Chronic illnesses of various types will naturally have an impact on growth. We will talk about these in details when we discuss short stature as a different class. And apart from all these medical causes, we have to remember various socioeconomic factors also affect growth. There are racial alterations, ethnic alterations. So with this basic idea, we will go into growth assessment. If growth is so important, we have to assess it. So in doing growth assessment, we first need to know what is normal growth, how much will mean that the growth is going in a normal way, and what we do to assess growth. Let us see. So for general growth, that is growth in size, what do we evaluate? We evaluate, as I said, most importantly, weight and height. There are other parameters also. But the evaluation can be done at one point. A child comes to you, you do the weight and height. That is the growth, assessment of growth as of today. Another important way of measuring growth is the velocity study. How is this child growing over time? Now, we will take these different parameters up one by one. I will not go into details, but there are certain things that we need to know about each of them, like weight. And then we need to know the normal growth pattern. There are formulae to calculate growth at different ages. I will not go into that. That you will get in your textbooks. But what you need to know is a general idea about what is the normal pattern of growth as regards weight. So weight at birth is, we know, 2.5 to 3 kg. Then what happens in the first year? Normally by 5 months, we expect that to become double. At 1 year, triple. And at 2 years, 4 times. So if a child is born 3 kg at 5 months, it will be 6. At 1 year, it will be 9. At 2 years, it will be 12. This is a very rough calculation. Then from around 2 to 7 years, or from, I would say, 3 to 7 years. In the second year, the weight gain is about 2.5 kg. 3 to 7 years, weight gain is 2 kg per year. 7 to 10 years, this increases again to 3 kg per year, till we come to the adolescent age or pubertal age, where the weight gain is, there is a sudden spurt, and total weight gain of 6 to 10 kg may happen during this whole pubertal period. So we have an idea now that the rate of growth varies, as we saw in that Scammons curves. I will take up another issue, that is what happens right at birth. A baby does not start gaining weight from day one. We all know that. The birth weight recedes during the first few days, only to regain the birth weight at 10 days. Then the increase starts at a rate of 20 to 30 grams per day for the first 3 months. Then what happens? Then this rate comes down, what was 20 to 30 grams per day actually meant, multiply this by 30. That means 600 to 900 grams per month in the first 3 months. this comes down to almost half, only 400 grams per month after 3 months. That is the later part of 1 year. So remember, weight gain is more in the first few months than in the later few months of the first year. And in the second year, this is almost half. So if a mother comes to you with a 1.5-year-old baby saying, my baby was growing so well when he was 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, now his weight is not increasing that much. So you can reassure the mother that this is normal for his age. That is where the knowledge is important. Then these are pictures showing you different scales that are used for taking weight. You need to be familiar with these, and you will be seeing these in your practical classes. These are spring balances, beam balances, electronic balance. Then we go on to height. Again, a few things that we must remember regarding height. Height means a standing height, and standing height is taken after the age of 2 years. Even though a 1-year-old or a 1.5-year-old child can stand, we will not take the standing height because that standing height will be less than the actual length of the child. Because habitually small babies stoop a little bit. So there is a reduction of the height by around 0.7 centimeter, 0.7 centimeter. So to do away with this problem, we measured the lying down, a horizontal length of an infant up to 2 years. And what are the instruments that we use? For the standing height, we use a stadiometer. For the lying down length, we use an infantometer. While doing this, proper positioning is very important. Standing or lying down, the child must be in a straight position. If standing, the heels, the buttock, the shoulder blade, and the back of the head must touch the wall. And the head should be held in a straight plane. And the easy way to find it out is the Frankfurt plane. What is the Frankfurt plane? A catch question in the exams. Frankfurt plane is a line which is drawn from the tragus of the ear to the angle of the eye. And if this line is horizontal, the head is straight. What are the normal values for length? Newborn baby weighs 50 centimeter. At 1 year, it becomes 75. That is an increase of 25 centimeters. 2 years, it becomes 87, increase of 12. So you see the increase is half in the second year as in the first year. Then from then on, it is about 5 to 6 centimeter per year till the child is 10 years of age. After that, in the pubertal growth spurt period, it increases to 7 to 8 centimeter per year. Here you see the picture of an infantometer. You all must be familiar with this. You make the child lie down, the head is held straight, the body is straightened, and particularly focus on the knees because infants tend to keep the knees flexed. Make the knees straight, and the foot should also be straight so that the heel touches the backboard, the baseboard. Okay. Now, as we measure the height and weight, as I had said, we want to measure the velocity. How is this child growing over time? There are certain other linear measurements that are important to assess growth. One is head circumference, because as the brain is growing, the head size will be also growing. Chest circumference and mid-arm circumference. A few words about each of these. These are important as short notes. And also, you need to know this very well if you are going to get into pediatrics. This is absolutely essential. So for head circumference, first of all, we use a tape, a fiberglass tape, which is non-expansile, which will not change in dimensions or in length with change in temperature. And then we look at how the measurement is being done. The tape is wound across the head, but we don't start from one end of the tape. We overlap the tape. You can see here there is an overlap. And a measurement is taken at the point where the two sides of the tape are crossing each other. See, if here there is 5 and if here there is 50, then the measure will be 50 minus 5, 45. This is something you need to practice. And what are the points that we go over? We go over the supraorbital ridge, then the parietal prominence, and finally the occipital protuberance. These are the 3 points that we need to touch. Values. At birth, the child's head circumference is 35 centimeter. In 1 year, it becomes 47. So here we get an increase of 12 centimeter. But in the second year, this increases only 2 centimeters, making 47 for up to 49. And from 2 years to 12 years, all these 10 years, the head circumference increases by only another 2 centimeters. So I repeat, 35, 47, 49, and 51. So importance of head circumference is there may be some abnormality in the head size because of brain abnormality. It may be microcephaly, it may be a megalencephaly, it may be hydrocephalus, lot of conditions, diseases pertaining to the brain and skull. Moreover, if we also will do the chest circumference, and a comparison between the two will give us an idea about the nutritional status. Let us see. So chest circumference, how do we do that? We measure the circumference at the nipple line. And what is peculiar of chest circumference and head circumference is that at birth, the head circumference is more than the chest circumference. Then by around, and the difference is of 3 centimeters. The two measurements become equal at 1 year. And after 1 year, chest circumference definitely is more than the head circumference. For us adults, definitely the chest circumference is much more than the head circumference. But suppose if at 1.5 years or 2 years or 3 years, you still get head circumference look less than chest circumference, that is an indicator of malnutrition. Another possibility is huge hydrocephalus, but that's a rarity. We will not talk about that. Our focus is malnutrition. Finally, coming to mid-arm circumference. Mid-arm circumference is measured at the level, at the mid-arm level. You know how to calculate it from the acromial end to the olecranon process. Midway between the two is the level where the measurement is done. More importantly, when, at what age is mid-arm circumference important? 6 months to 60 months, that is 6 months to 5 years. And this single measurement is an indicator of malnutrition. So that is where the importance lies. If a child, a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old child is brought to you and you are suspecting malnutrition, you have nothing else with you, no other instrument except a tape, can you diagnose malnutrition? You can, by measuring the mid-arm circumference. And the cutoff points are moderate malnutrition, less than 12.5 centimeters. Severe malnutrition, less than 11.5 centimeters. Shockley's tape, again, is another instrument made out of paper of common use by the health workers, which has a color tip, red, yellow, and green colors, which will indicate whether the child is going into malnutrition or not. Okay, finally, before I conclude this portion of the talk, I would like to mention, as I said in the first slide, that an ovum, an embryo, a fetus, a toddler, they're different. You can diagnose who is a fetus and who is a toddler. How? It's not just the size. I repeat, a human being doesn't grow like a football as it is blown out. Why? Because it's not just the size, it's the change of proportion that is very important. And this picture will show you, see, if we consider the different body proportions in a newborn, a 2-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 12-year-old, there are definite differences. Now, this 12-year-old boy, if we could shrink him to the size, to say a newborn, to the size of a newborn, would he look like a newborn? No. because his proportions are different. What we mean by proportions? Look, if you can see this white point here, this consider this to be the midpoint of the body and the umbilicus. So the upper segment and lower segment are almost equal in a newborn. Whereas in an older child, a 12-year-old, the upper segment from the umbilicus upwards is much less, much smaller proportionately than the lower portions. And the limbs are also relatively larger over here. So so we need to also measure the different proportions. How do we do it? In older children, we do the upper segment, lower segment ratio. We take the length or the height, and then we take the length from the symphysis pubis to the heel. This gives us the lower segment. Subtract that from the height, you get the upper segment, and you take the ratio. Another very important measurement is the arm span. Extend both arms from the tip of the middle finger on one hand to the tip of the middle finger of the other hand. This is the arm span. Compare this to the length. Arm span is to length of the individual is also another important ratio. We will talk about these in more details when we talk about short stage. In an infant, what are the measurements we take? We take the crown rump. Put the child on the infantometer, flex the thighs, and you take the measure from the crown to the rump. And subtract this measurement from the whole length. You get heel rump. So crown rump is to heel rump. If you can see here, this is from over here to down over here is the crown rump, and subtract that from the length, you get the heel rump. And then we take the ratio. Okay. Now we go on. So these are the measurements that we have done to assess the growth of a child. What do these measurements mean? To make these meaningful, they need to be plotted somewhere to give us an idea. And this plotting, if it is done continuously over time, will tell us how the growth is going. And following this is monitoring, and that is growth monitoring. So we will now talk about how this assessment is put into a framework, how we can look at it, how we can follow it over time. So what is growth monitoring? I've already told you. We have to remember growth monitoring is a vertical process. Okay, it is following the growth pattern over time. When do we do it? Starting from birth, you can do it as long as the child is growing. That is 0 to 20 years or 0 to 18 years. But the most important important period is from birth to 6 years. Because that is when the most effective growth is going on, particularly pertaining to the nutritional aspect of the child. Now, this growth monitoring is required for every single child. Just like immunization is required for every child in the country must get this facility, that is growth monitoring. So who will do it? If it's left only to the doctors or pediatricians, we cannot reach all the children. So the health workers, the Anganwadi workers in the ICDS centers, the ASHA and ANM, they are the ones who are doing the growth monitoring for every single baby, both urban and rural. And of course, pediatricians have to do it too. So by now, you know its importance. Let us recap. Why is it important? Why do we need to do it? We need to do a growth monitoring to understand how the child is growing. And that means whether we will be diagnosing whether there is a growth failure, whether the growth is faltering a little bit. By looking at this growth faltering, we can diagnose certain disease conditions. The child was growing pretty well. Suddenly it's falling down. We will ask the mother about the child's nutrition, the child's health condition. Was there a diarrhea? Was there a attack of fever, measles? So it's a diagnostic tool as well. It definitely indicates a nutritional deficit, and it is also used to help create parental awareness, because it's in black and white. It's something showing on a chart which we can show the mother. Look, your child's health was improving well. Now it's coming down. So these are all the answers to the why growth monitoring needs to be done. As we go for growth monitoring, let us look at it this way. A child is brought to you by the mother, and the mother is saying, my child is not growing well. So what will you do? You will assess the growth. For that, you will take some measurements. But are measurements enough? See, if the mother says, I took my child's weight, he is only weighing 12 kg. Can you comment on this? You cannot. What do you need to know? You need to know the age of the child. You will ask the mother, how old is your child? If the child is 1.5 years, you will tell her, don't worry, not that the child is normal, the child is overweight. If the child is 2 years old, okay, again, don't worry, it's perfectly okay. But if the child is 5 years old and 12 kg, the child is not growing properly. There is growth fault. So you need to know the weight, height, etc., and the age, and then you can calculate. We do a plotting according to this. Plotting on a chart. I'll come to the charts. So to do plotting, mostly we go for age-dependent criteria. The age is required to assess what sort of plotting. Weight for age. So on one side in the curve, there will be weight, on the other axis will be the age. Similarly, height for age, head circumference for age, chest circumference for age. Now suppose you do not know the age. So you need certain criteria, where you can go without knowing the age. You cannot just say, I don't know, your child's age is not evident. Cannot tell you anything about the group. That is not possible. So age-independent criteria are also there, of which there are many. I'll just talk about 3. One is weight for height. If you know the weight and the height, we can compare, and then we can plot it against a chart to find out. Mid-arm circumference, I've already discussed, doesn't take age into account if it's within that range of 6 months to 60 months. And finally comes BMI. That is weight by height square. And with this, we can draw an inference on the growth velocity. What do you mean? The growth going on, the rate of. So to sum up, for nutritional assessment, what are the assessments that we commonly do? Weight for age, height for age independent, weight for height, BMI, mid-arm circumference. Chest circumference for smaller kids. And one more thing I hadn't mentioned so far is the skin fold thickness, where you assess the thickness of the soft tissue with a calipers. Now, after all this, the plotting comes in. So for plotting, we need charts, and the chart will tell us whether the curve of growth according to time for a child, whether it is acceptable or not, whether it is normal or not. So this chart has to show us certain curves which are normal, which are within acceptable limits, which are not. Put it very simply. There are many charts in use. Some international charts have been used for a long time, which the CDC charts from USA are very well known. Then came up the WHO growth charts, which were formulated using various children from different countries, from the different continents, and then the charts were prepared. And now we also have some indigenous Indian charts, particularly the IAP charts are in vogue right now. All these charts can be of 2 types. As I mentioned, to understand whether the growth of a child is okay or not, it has to be plotted against certain curves that are already given to us. And these curves go by either the percentile curves or the Z-score curves. So we have generally 2 types of charts: percentile charts and Z-score charts. Before I go into charts, we will have a very quick recap about the normal curve. Otherwise, it is difficult to understand the chart. Now, what happens in a normal curve? for any population, say we're taking weight of 100 children, we will find that the weight varies within a range. Let me give you an example. We have taken 100 children of age 1 year, or let's put it 2 years, easier to calculate. And the weight comes over a range of 5 kg to 15 kg. Okay. And we find most of the children are having a value around 10 kg. So the central value or the mean, the average is 10, and most of the children will be having 10 kg. Further away from 10, like 5 or 15, are weights that only few children will have. With this, if we plot the weights, we get a normal curve, this bell curve. Everybody is familiar with this bell curve. Now, if we analyze this curve, and if you go back to your statistics classes, you will remember the standard deviation. Say in this particular case, the standard deviation value is 2. So if 10 is the mean, one standard deviation less than 10, and one standard deviation more than 10. That is a range of 8 to 12. Children having a weight of 8 to 12 kg will constitute 67% of the population. That is between these two lines, from here, right from here to here. See, this is within one standard deviation, and that includes 67% of the population. Now, the percentile charts and the Z-score charts. One Z-score or Z-score is roughly equivalent to one standard deviation. So, if I draw a chart where the weight is plotted according to the mean, that is the central line, and then one line goes along those children having weight less by one standard deviation, that will be the -1 Z-score curve, and children having a weight one standard deviation above the mean, the curve there will be the +1 standard deviation or +1 Z-score. I'll show you the Z-score. So the range between these two curves will be from -1 to +1 Z-score. This is the Z-score curve. If we consider a percentile curve, what do we mean? As I said, 67% will fall within this. Half of this will be less, half of this more. Let's go to the less side. So half of 67, roughly, let me say it is 33. So somebody having 8 kg weight, one standard deviation less than 10, he will have 33% of the population with a weight more than, think carefully, more than his weight, and 50 out of 100, 50 are on this side. Subtract 33 from 50. What do we get? 17. So he will have 17 children having weight less than him with a weight of 8 kg. So this is his centile. His centile is 17th centile. Rather, if we come right over here, the 2%, somebody having a weight at this level is at the second centile. That means only 2 children out of 100 has a weight less than him. I hope I have been able to explain it. So now let us take a look with this background at this WHO growth chart. You can read over here. This is a chart for birth to 24 months meant for boys. And it's a length for age and weight for age percentile chart. That is why over here you can see figures written right down below. Here is the 2. This is 2 percentile. This is 50th percentile. That is the mean value. So 50 will have more than this, 50 will have less than this value. And this is the 95th centile. So in this regard, here's an example. Say a 3-year-old child has a weight of 6 kg. So see the red spot? This is where we have plotted the weight. Now this weight It falls on which line? It falls on this line. Let us see what centile it is. It comes to the 25th centile. So a 6-year-old with a 3-year-old with a weight of 6 kg falls on the 25th centile. This is how a centile chart is. And for z-score, you will, instead of centile, you will see +1, -1, +2, -2 showing the z-scores. That is easier to understand. Nowadays, we go by the z-score charts because malnutrition is very well defined. Weight or height, or weight for height. If it falls within ±2 standard deviation or 2 z-score, consider it as normal. -2 to -3, moderate malnutrition. Less than -3, severe malnutrition. Very easy to calculate. Okay. Now here you see a familiar picture. These are the curves that are seen in the health cards that all our children in India receive. Again, the different lines are depicted in the change of color. Anybody having a weight falling within the green is normal. Falling within yellow, there's a faltering. Red, malnutrition. So here is the monitoring card, health card with the weight plotted, which will give you a clear idea to explain all the factors I had mentioned, the importance of malnutrition. So you can see it here. This little child has been coming to the health center every month and the weight has been taken regularly. What was happening? You see these two lines? This is z-score -2 and z-score +2. So between these two lines, if the child remains within these two lines, perfect. That is what was happening till point B when it started going down. It was still within the limits, but it was going down, indicating faltering. C, it had come to a malnutrition level, indicating the child needed nutritional supplementation, diagnosis of disease and care. And with all that implementation, the child again started improving. The curve was going up till after D. So this is an increasing curve. The child is again back to normal. So this single slide explains the importance of the growth monitoring. I think that's all. So from today's class, the take-home message will be what we mean by growth, what are the different parameters that are looked into, how, in short, how to do it, that is how to assess growth, age-dependent and age-independent criteria, understanding them, plotting them on a chart, what a growth chart is, what the growth chart tells us, and finally, how we do a growth monitoring on a health chart, on a growth chart, and the importance of growth monitoring. Thank you.